we are here today because we want to talk about the enormous missing gap in the conversation of nutrition and health. There's so much discussion about food policy, and one thing is just never, ever discussed. Food can be medicine, and food can also be poison. A lot of the foods that all of us in this room would consider to be part of a healthy diet, things like grains and fruits and vegetables, can often carry very heavy toxic burdens that are unaccounted for. In policy discussions surrounding nutrition, you see a lot of buzzwords. There's a lot of focus on things like sodium and food access and nutrient density. And those things certainly are very important to discuss, but the question is, how healthy can a meal or food be if it also is laden with toxic pesticides and hormones in the case of meat and heavy metals? Nowhere in the dietary guidelines for Americans put out by HHS and the USDA is there any mention whatsoever of the synthetic toxic pesticides and heavy metals that often accompany the meal that you eat. In 3 different meetings that we had with the EPA, including, actually it was run by Zen Honeycutt here from Moms Across America, 3 different meetings went to the EPA. We presented peer-reviewed independent research on the many wide array of health implications of consuming glyphosate, the active ingredient in the weed killer Roundup. And despite the fact that this was peer-reviewed independent research, the EPA told us that it was merely anecdotal. There's nothing anecdotal about this research. And they said if we wanted to have any change made, then we needed to come over to the Hill and talk to you guys, so here we are today. Today we're going to present the latest research on the statistics of children's health and disease in this country, the recent test results on school lunches, and also fast food results by Moms Across America. And we're going to talk about regenerative organic farming and how it really holds a future of health for all of us. $4.1 trillion is spent in this country on healthcare each year, and that number is driven mostly by chronic disease. This expert panel knows a big reason why that number is so high, so I would love to introduce them. Today, we have pediatrician Dr. Michelle Pero, who is going to report on the current state of children's health. Dr. Pero is a veteran pediatrician with over 41 years of experience in acute and integrative medicine. She has both directed and worked as attending physician from New York's Metropolitan Hospital to UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital in Oakland. Dr. Pero is the author of the book, What's Making Our Children Sick? How industrial food is causing an epidemic of chronic illness and what parents and doctors can do about it, and is the founder of the organization GMO Science. Next, we'll hear from Zen Honeycutt, the founding executive director of Moms Across America, an 11-year-old nonprofit national coalition of unstoppable moms. She is an international speaker and author of Unstoppable, Transforming Sickness and Struggle into Triumph, Empowerment, and the Celebration of Community. Zen Honeycutt is a former consumer representative to the California Organic Products Advisory Committee. Then we will have Dr. John Fagan. Dr. Fagan is the CEO and Chief Scientist of Health Research Institute, a nonprofit research and service institution dedicated to understanding the links between food quality, diet, and health. HRI labs tested the food samples we will be discussing today. Last but not least, Mark Dudla is a 6th-generation farmer and owns Dudla Farms Organics in Evansville, Wisconsin. He's a keynote speaker educating other farmers about organics and regenerative soil health as it relates to human health across the United States and Canada. Mark currently has a seat on the Cropping Systems Trial Advisory Board, Rodale Institute, and the Wisconsin Organic Advisory Council. So, I'd like to introduce Dr. Pero.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Am I on? No. Okay. How's that? Sounds good? All right. So I'm going to share this high-tech presentation with you, and I'm going to look at my slides with you, and what I'm talking about is my favorite topic, which is the state of our children's health. And looking at some of you in the audience today, you could be some of my patients looking at those adorable young faces. I'm so thrilled you're here. So I want to begin by talking about this book I wrote 6 years ago. And it's basically what's making our kids sick about industrial foods. And since that time, in this short 6-year period, things have become abysmally worse in regards to the state of our children's health. And we're going to get into the weeds on what has happened. So I want to talk about the true pandemic, which is the chronic poisoning of our children. I'm all known for about being dramatic. I work with children, right? And the crime of our times. And before I get into that, I'm just going to do a mini quick survey. Any of you here have children? Okay. Grandchildren? Any of you know a child? Any of you do babysitting? Any of you like children? Any of you prefer your dog to your child? Okay, all right. I just want to talk about children in terms of our children. We're not talking about our children or their children. This is our children, right? This is American children, and they're being chronically poisoned every single day, and that's happening at school. And I'm going to tell you why and how that affects their health. So everyone loves statistics, right? I can't give a presentation without getting to talk about stats. Let me share a few stats with you. I'm going to start with asthma, which is basically an autoimmune disease, by the way, and that affects about 1 in 6 to 1 in 8 children. And if you're Puerto Rican, 1 in 5, that other country of Puerto Rico. No, I mean the other U.S., Commonwealth. Eczema, 1 in 5 kids, 60% of infants have eczema, and parents will do anything to stop the itch that their kids experience all night. They're up all night, and when parents are up all night, parents are cranky, families are cranky, kids are cranky. Everyone's cranky. We'll talk about allergies. 2 to 3 of children have environmental allergies, while although that's not life-threatening, kids are miserable doing this all day at school, right, rubbing their goopy noses, and they can't concentrate, and they look like that. It's terrible. We'll move on to food intolerances. I'm from California. This is not a juju phase out of California. Kids are really gluten, dairy, soy, and corn intolerant. And I bet if I were to do an informal poll out there, most of you would have gut issues. Of my patients, 90% had gut issues, often undiagnosed by conventional medicine, particularly high kids in the spectrum, autism spectrum. We're going to get into that. And obesity. Obesity is not a benign disorder. It goes on to develop metabolic disease later in life, cardiovascular disorders, autoimmunity, and cancer, affecting anywhere from 1 in 3 to 1 in 5 kids, depending what state they live in. And it's a national crisis. I have some stats for you and on the table in this handout, which I loved all the way from California, making copies. Copies are very heavy, by the way, in case you're worried. And any references I give you are located in this handout and online at gmoscience.org. This whole talk, all our talks are cited and referenced, because otherwise we get skewered. Otherwise we wouldn't be valid. That's what I meant to say. I didn't mean to say we get skewered. So this is what our kids look like. If you don't believe that, go to a public school, or you can even go into a playground, and kids don't look the same way they look for some of us sitting here on this panel. And while this gentleman sets up the projector, I'll keep on going. Is that cool? Okay, let's keep chatting. But what really rattled my cage was approximately 20 years ago when I first started seeing the uptick in autism spectrum disorder. When I was training at Bellevue and NYU in New York City, we were called into the room to see a kid with autism. I'll just call it autism. It is the spectrum. And now, that was about 1 in 10,000 kids. And now it's about 1 in 36 kids nationwide. And in California, 1 in 20 to 1 in 22 kids now is on the autism spectrum. And that indeed is the elephant in the room. Not to mention, we are seeing millions of kids now with increased rates of neurocognitive disorders, emotional lability, mood disorders, not to mention sleep. Up to 44% of children have what we call dysomnia, sleep disorders. They cannot sleep. That's almost half of kids. And that's not including kids with neurocognitive, neurologic issues. The number goes higher. No sleep, that means no health. Your immune system works at night. Your brain cleans out via your lymphatics at nighttime while you're sleeping. So forget those all-nighters working, and you want to get your sleep. So let's talk about the herd of elephants in the room about COVID impacts. And you might say, why is she talking about COVID? We're here talking about school lunches. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, I'm going to tell you, right? You know I'm going to tell you. Why? Because a lot of things happened during COVID. You know, everyone knows what happened during COVID. Kids experienced social lockdowns, stressors. They weren't able to see their peers. They weren't able to go to school. And that created a lot of mental health issues. And since that time, mental health was a problem prior to COVID. It has gone up since COVID, particularly anxiety and depression. There was a study in the UK called the Myriad study. They looked at 28,000 kids in the UK. It's a lot of kids. And those numbers of depression and anxiety skyrocketed. Ours were even higher here in the US. But what did protect kids was going back to school. That was protected in terms of mental health. So we want to get kids back in school. It's a positive environment for children. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that during COVID and otherwise, the kids who are impacted most are kids with impoverished backgrounds and kids of color, and those kids got hit the hardest by far. So that is something we need to focus on, food justice as well. This is a conversation we need to have. Many children, particularly children of food scarcity, receive anywhere from 1 to 3 meals a day from school. That's how many meals they're eating in school. So all their nutrition comes from school lunches. So it shouldn't be a wallow, right? We should give them a good impact, because that's where they get the majority of their food intake. So let's go back to school. What did I even say here? I basically said school nutrition is one of the best ways to support children's learning back to school and back to health. Okay? So far, so good, right? You're all with me? We're still awake? We do have organic coffee over there. So a couple of things I want to do a little sidestep here, a little sidebar. You know, let's just switch a little bit, but we'll get back to the big Broadway moment. Don't worry. I want to talk about this National School Lunch Program. And this was low cost of free lunch program for kids. And this program expired in 2022. During COVID, we were giving out school lunches to kids. And so kids who were used to receiving their nutrition from school were then cut off. There are dietary guidelines set, federal guidelines by the USDA, and school meals must meet these federal guidelines. And if you go online, and I gave you the website and it's in the handout, these guidelines are fabulous. Like, wow, look at these guidelines. They're tremendous. Very impressive. Things like whole foods, veggies, grains, dairy. They say include fat-free or low-fat. Kids should be eating full fat, by the way. Full fat for children. Protein foods and oils, preferably no seed oils, by the way. They're not so healthy. Kids have very high omega-6. You want more omega-3s. But we can talk about nutrition after this. We're going to be hanging around so you can ask questions. So I say, wow, look at these guidelines. Fabulous. But the bigger question is, are school lunches meeting the USDA guidelines? That is the question we pose. Let's take a look and see if that's true. Are they doing that? Well, Moms Across America and Zen Honeycutt did this study, and Zen will go into the details about this study, but I want to pull out a couple of key points in that and look at it from the health perspective of the pediatrician, right? So we'll talk about health. And 95% of those school lunches contain glyphosate, one of the main ingredients in Roundup. You all know what Roundup is, right? Anyone here not know Roundup? No, you all know Roundup. Okay, Roundup and its breakdown product called AMPA, as well as other pesticides, and you're going to hear about that. 100% of those school lunches contain heavy metals. Heavy metals are not benign. They are neurotoxic. They cause every disease known for children, including neurological disease and cancers. We'll go into that a bit. And veterinarian drugs, because our school children should have a dose of veterinarian drugs and veterinarian hormones that we give to chickens. Maybe not so healthy, right? Some of the nutrient levels, well, actually most of them, and Zeb will discuss that with you, not to mention absent. Like which ones were absent? Vitamin B9 and B12. Those vitamins, in case you don't know, are methylating vitamins, which means they help you detoxify. And kids cannot detoxify because they don't have these nutrients. So they cannot clear the heavy metals, right? So they're a toxic mess, hot mess. But another sidebar here, quick sidebar, because gosh, look at this EPA the Toxic Substances Control Act. Any of you familiar with the Toxic Substances Control Act? Well, I see some heads nodding. Good, I wasn't. This was passed in 1976, and then President Obama kind of cleaned it up in 2016. But what's very interesting what this act said, and I'm going to read it to you. I didn't memorize it. And what it said was, the Toxic Substance Control Act of 1976 provides the EPA with authority to require reporting, record keeping, and testing requirements and restrictions relating to chemical substances and/or mixtures. Certain substances are generally excluded from this act, including food, drugs, and pesticides. However, it doesn't exclude heavy metals. Right, so what does that mean? I gave you an article, it's in the talk, it's in the handout, showing that those heavy metals are toxic to kids in the worst way. So based on the EPA, their own position and that act, they must ban present school lunches. Lunches tested are 100% positive for heavy metals and pose an unreasonable risk to the brain, cardiovascular system, and cancer. So by the EPA's own act, school lunches must be banned. They're a health risk to children because as if the pesticides weren't bad enough that our kids are eating 1 to 3 times a day, they're eating heavy metals with each bite. Let's move on. Have I depressed you all? Significantly good. We'll end on a positive note. We're solutionaries. So our timing couldn't be more perfect. Yesterday was World Food Day. Hundreds of thousands of kids tuned in to this online event promoting organic regenerative farming. And I thought our timing here, of us being here with you today, was just perfect. So let's get into the toxicity of glyphosate. I've been studying this problem for 23 years. I told you, you heard I've been practicing for 41. I know more about glyphosate than my own children. So I'm going to tell you what it does. I broke it down for you in simple terms: gut, brain, and metabolic. And we'll go through it a little bit. You guys are interested in what it does to you? Sure, you're eating it every day. It's in that pizza that they're serving in the cafeteria. But let me go through it with you. One of the main things it does is glyphosate's an antibiotic. Monsanto now Bayer patented that in 2010. And it kills off your gut microbiome. We figured that out in 2013 from a veterinarian study out in Germany. It kills off lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, promoting the propagation of pathogenic microbes like Clostridia, super high in kids on the spectrum, autism spectrum. How do I know? Because I test them. That's how I know. And Salmonella. So it's antibiotic. That leads to things like irritable bowel syndrome and inflammatory bowel disease and autoimmune disease. 1 in 10 kids now has autoimmune disease. That's shocking. And it causes something called leaky gut and dysbiosis, and abnormal microbiome. It causes brain issues. I didn't say correlate, I said cause, which it means in 2020, a paper came out which showed how glyphosate causes autism. We've been studying pesticides in the Salinas Valley, a growing region of California, for the past 20 years at UC Berkeley. The data on how pesticides harm children's brains is out. It's called the Chamacos study. Dr. Brenda Espinosa is the lead researcher, and ADHD in that community is off the charts, not to mention poor birth outcomes. It chelates minerals. It's a mineral chelator. It binds metals, like which ones? I know you want to know. You're dying to know, right? Zinc, magnesium. Those levels are super low in the kids because we test them, right? If your pediatrician is not testing them, they're not doing their job. And you need magnesium in over 200 reactions in your brain. So kids have no metals, no brain function. This is simple math, folks. It's contaminated with heavy metals. The actual pesticide formulations are contaminated with heavy metals. That was the work of Dr. Gilles Seralini in France in 2015. So we know that there's arsenic, cadmium, cobalt, chromium, and other delightful metals in the pesticide formulations. What else? It causes NAFLD, which is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, affecting 1 in 3 adults, 25% of the global population, 13 to 70% of kids, and up to 33% of obese children. And is silent. It goes on to create steatohepatitis, inflammation of your liver, and eventually fibrosis. Causes kidney damage, and I'll share an anecdote with you briefly about kidney damage as well. Inerts, the companies don't mention what those are. Those inerts are also unidentified substances in the formulations or endocrine disruptor, and it causes cancer. We have an epidemic of kidney disease in Central America. It's called Mesoamerican nephropathy. We know they say, well, we don't know what causes it. Yes, we do. They're all spraying glyphosate. I had a patient with kidney disease. He wasn't my patient. I treated his son. The only thing I did with that dad was change his diet from conventional to organic. He came in with 20% renal function. 8 months later, he had regained 80% of his kidney function. He was on the dialysis list. He's in this book. I wrote about him. That was the most shocking case I ever heard. He went to his UCSF doctor, and what they told him was, well, we must have misdiagnosed you. Diet alone cannot reverse your kidney disease. I guess it was misdiagnosed with 12 years. Shame on UCSF. Okay, last but not least, I'll be wrapping up. I'm kind of over my time here, but I would be remiss if I didn't share with you that pesticides cause cancer in children. This is recently published right out of DC from the National Center for Health Research. And they state, may I read, even small amounts of pesticides are very harmful for children, causing behavior problems, harm children's thinking memory, and increase the risk of childhood cancers. I don't even know why we're having this conversation further. That should be the coup de grace. Right there, everything should stop in getting the pesticides out of our children's school lunch. Children are not mini adults, and be clear, there are no studies on the toxicological mixes of these chemicals in our children. So, and what we're not saying is ban Roundup and bring out a more toxic pesticide like 2,4-D dicamba. We're not saying that. But be clear what we're not saying. Last but not least, being clear that GMOs are not benign. They become so common in our vernacular, people think they're benign, they're not. The first scientist to study this, Dr. Arpad Pusztai, he found that GMOs cause reproductive harm, gut issues, and immunologic harm. And after he announced his findings in 1998, he was a hero in UK for 2 days before he was banned. They closed his lab. He developed got a heart attack, but he survived. This is not a HIPAA violation. He tells his story in a movie called Scientists Under Attack. When you eat a GMO, which is just about everything you're eating, corn, soy, canola, alfalfa, sugar beets, 50% of Hawaiian papayas, innate apples, innate potatoes, Arctic apples, we can go on and on. What is a genetically modified organism? And per our FDA, they are not labeled, but you guys know that. So, just to wrap it up, school lunches in France. School kids, there's a film about this, 8 American school lunches. Those are those little plastic-wrapped plastic chicken nuggies with French fries that have acrylamides in them with a little ketchup as a fruit, microwave with an extra dose of plastic. And those French kids would not eat those American school lunches. And as a matter of fact, they want to know where the brie and the camembert was on their school lunch plate. A little bit of a different story, wouldn't you say? Mm-hmm. So, anyway, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm going to pass the mic on to my friend and colleague, Zen Honeycutt.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I am Zen Honeycutt of Monster Across America. I'm the founding executive director of Monster Across America and also co-founder of the Neighborhood Food Network. And our mission at Monster Across America is to educate and empower mothers and others with actions and solutions to create healthy communities. And so I'm very excited that you're here today to be our partners in creating healthy communities all across America. And I sincerely appreciate you being here and taking time to listen to this fantastic panel that came from California and Iowa and Wisconsin and North Carolina. Thank you so much for being here. We tested 43 public school lunches last year because 40 is a scientifically significant number that the USDA cannot ignore. And the results were abysmal, as was already mentioned. 95.3% of the school lunches contain carcinogenic, endocrine disrupting, and liver disease causing glyphosate, also neurotoxic and nervous system damaging. And this is a shocking number because the previous testing done by the Detox Project, which you may have heard of, and even the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that tested over 7,800 samples, found only 60% of the grocery store food was positive for glyphosate. So our school lunches are much higher in glyphosate levels, showing that the cheapest ingredients are being used that are sprayed with glyphosate as a drying agent, such as wheat and peas and beans, legumes, soy, things like that. So glyphosate is not just sprayed on GMOs, it's sprayed on grains as a drying agent before harvest. because it's quicker for the farmers. And the problem is the crops are Roundup ready and they can keep growing, but we are not Roundup ready. So we consume the residues that do not wash dry or cook off. Okay, it's misleading. These do not wash dry or cook off. We found that 74% of the samples contained at least one of 29 different harmful pesticides. And there were 4 veterinary drugs and hormones that were found in 9 school lunch samples at levels up to 130 parts per billion. And John Bateman will tell you about the significance of that. There's instances, for example, a school lunch counselor, a friend of mine, since her 15-year-old came into her office and was crying because she was lactating in the shower. I believe this is because our children are consuming veterinary drugs that cause the lactation of cows to produce more milk. So our children are consuming this, and it is having harmful effects on them. There's 100% of the school lunches, as Michelle said, contain heavy metals. Some were levels up to 6,293 times higher than the EPA's maximum levels allowed in drinking water. So people can say that they are low levels, but many of them are extraordinarily high, what they should be. And of course, the majority of the samples were abysmally low in nutrients, which can impact behavior and learning and biowork discussion. So it should be noted that 30 million of these school meals are served each day to our children. Many ingredients are GMO and are derived again from cross-reactive glyphosate as a drying agent. So then we tested the top 20 fast food brands, and it should be noted that 85 million Americans eat fast food every day. And the reason why we went for fast food next is because when we learned about the school lunches, we were told by a school lunch director that they go to conferences and there are booths set out, and they are fast food companies, which are providing up to about 85 to 90% of the food is provided by private companies, not the USDA in America. And so Domino's and Del Taco and all that are serving food. They're not allowed to market in the schools. Only Impossible Foods gets to do that right now, and they're pretty soon Lunchables will get to do that. But it is fast food that's being served to our children predominantly. And the results there were also horrific. We tested for 104 veterinary drugs and hormones. We did only find 3 of them. However, one of the samples was it's an antiparasitic called narcarbazine, and it's also a known aviary contraceptive. It prevents birds from laying eggs, and it was found in a Chick-fil-A sandwich. It was once prohibited for use from toxicity, now it has been allowed again. 6 out of 10 or 60% of the fast food samples contained an antibiotic called myrmecin, which is not approved by the FDA for human use and has been shown to cause severe harm when consumed by humans. You can actually go to the next slide to see these stats. And 40% of the samples contain an antibiotic called narracin, which has been shown in animals to cause anorexia, diarrhea, death, all kinds of heart and skeletal muscle problems. And monosin and narracin are antibiotics that are called ionophores that are toxic to horses and dogs at extremely low levels, leaving their hind legs dysfunctional. And I'm wondering the impact on human beings on that. We don't know. Ionophores also cause weight gain in beef and dairy cattle and are therefore widely used, but they can cause acute cardiac degeneration and necrosis as well. We tested for glyphosate as well. 100% were positive for glyphosate, some only trace levels, but 100% in every single sample. And 66% were positive for harmful pesticides, chronic effects of pesticide it was 66% of the samples, but 90% of the top 20 fast food brands contain between 1 and 9 of 27 different harmful pesticides. And 100% of the top 20 fast food brands contained heavy metals, cadmium, between 74% and 1,158% higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. And the lead was also in 100% of the samples, and the highest amount was 912% higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. That was found in a Sonic drive-in cheeseburger. So the PFAS and day-late results are still pending. And so we will be releasing more information about that. I also want to add arsenic was detected in 17% of the fast food samples, with the highest level found in a Panda's Express orange chicken and white rice at 362% higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. Arsenic has been found in chicken feed at such high levels that hazmat licenses are required to be a trucker to move chicken feed. This is not good, folks. It's often found in the fertilizer as well. We then tested vitamin B. I don't think I have results on the slide here, but vitamin B levels were, as Michelle mentioned, found 0. Vitamin B9 and B12, folate is very important for cerebral function and detoxification. We found vitamin B3 levels that were so low that a woman, in order to meet the recommended daily intake of 14 milligrams per day, would have to eat 333 Chick-fil-A sandwiches. A man would have to eat 380. Keep that in mind when I talk about vitamin B3 later on in this conversation. The caloric intake was high, of course the protein level was low, and there were above healthy levels of fats, of course, in this fast food. Okay, so now I want to talk about the nutrient content a little bit more too. There was a published study by in August Celebration by Linda Grover found that in 1948 spinach contained 158 milligrams of iron for each of 100 grams. 25 years later, the same quantity of spinach contains less than 2.2 milligrams of iron. And present, to obtain the same quantity of iron of 50 years ago, we would have to eat 75 spinach portions. And as you can tell from what I just said about the Chick-fil-A sandwiches, where of course there's no spinach, the numbers are much higher now, even for fast food. You know, hundreds of these servings. The average is 74 servings. It was, I believe, it was Chipotle that had you only need to eat 9 servings to get your recommended daily intake of vitamin B3, but so on average it was about 74 of each of the fast food meals that you would have to consume in one day to get your recommended daily intake. Okay, so then that moves us on to, well, this is due to industrial farming. Today's school lunches and fast food are chronically low in vital minerals essential for bodily organ function. And Dr. Don Huber reports that the minerals are indeed lower than what is needed to meet daily requirements. And studies have shown that glyphosate residue levels common in soil chelate these minerals. That's what Michelle was talking about. We said metals, but chelate minerals, the same, the manganese.
Which are metals?
Oh, which are also metal, okay. They chelate them, but they make them less available for the plant uptake. And if the food suppliers want to increase nutrient density and subsequently crop yield, focusing on eliminating the use of glyphosate and residues in the soil would be essential. And the number one way to do that, folks, is to stop allowing glyphosate to be sprayed as a drying agent on our grains and crops. That would eliminate the majority of the glyphosate consumption in the food supply. Another study that showed the consumption of pesticides, I just have to mention that real quick because we didn't touch on that. The Heartland Health Research Alliance, Charles Vanguard, showed that if we just switched our vegetables and fruits to organic, we would reduce 98%, we would eliminate 98% of the consumption of pesticides, not including glyphosate, right? The other harmful pesticides, 98% of that consumption would go away. And we found this in the pizza that we tested, Pizza Hut pizza. We tested a pepperoni cheese pizza and we tested a vegetable top pizza. The vegetable top pizza had 21 parts per billion of pesticides on it. The pepperoni cheese pizza had 0. So it's the vegetables in the school lunches and in the fast food predominantly that are bringing the presence of the pesticides. It's the wheat that's bringing the presence of the glyphosate, okay? So that's just those 2 changes would be starting. Okay, next slide I talk about 3 very important incidences or studies. One is from Food and Behavior, The Natural Connection, written by Barbara Reed Stitt. This was the first book, one of the first books that I read when my kids got all kinds of chronic illnesses. And she is a Lifetime Achievement Award winner. She studied parolees, criminals, and serial killers and high school dropouts for 20 years. And she did a minimum of a year changing out of their food. In the process, she found out that the number one thing that they all had in common was not their race or their socioeconomic backgrounds, not that they lived in urban cities. The number one thing that these parolees, criminals, serial killers, and high school dropouts had in common was that they bragged that they lived on junk food. And they all had low levels of, guess which vitamin? Vitamin B3, which impacts the prefrontal cortex and decision making, right? It's one of the essential vitamins. And when she switched out the food for a year in the prison, the recidivism rate dropped. It switched, actually, from 70% coming back to 70% staying out. And when she did the same thing in the schools, got rid of the processed junk food and the sugars and the sodas and had whole, healthy foods, the dropout rate went from high school of 5,000 kids from 500 down to 14. And the kids went on to go to college, a significantly higher number went on to go to college and to be successful in life. And then another study, you can see a hamster there in a wheat field. Actually, the study was mostly about hamsters in a monocrop cornfield in Germany. It was out of the University of Strasbourg. The wheat field is just for comparison of the hamsters that had a more diverse diet. Well, in the monocrop cornfield, the hamster population was declining, and they wanted to know why. So they studied them and found a very disturbing fact, and that was that the mothers were cannibalistic. They were eating their young on the first day of life. And when they tested the mother hamsters, they found that they were completely devoid of, guess which vitamin? Vitamin B3. And when they administered vitamin B3, the cannibalism completely stopped. So we would have asked you to wonder if violent behavior in America could be stopped by simply having nutrient-dense food. Do we really need to focus on more gun laws, which criminals are not going to follow, or do we need to focus on having safe, non-toxic, nutrient-dense food in our school system and for the American public? I would assert the latter. The last image is of a young Hispanic boy, because we had across America a person come to us and say, please, I'm just begging you to please keep doing what you're doing and talking about toxins in the food supply and benefits organic. And she wanted to share with me, this was like the day after another school shooting, which was horrific. She said, my son, when he was 9 years old, had mental health issues, and school called her and said, please come get your son, he just threatened to blow up the school with a bomb. And she said, well, I told you repeatedly he has mental health issues and we need help. She was a single mom, low income, Hispanic in Santa Ana. She didn't know what to do. So they said, okay, we'll send him to a psychiatrist. Send him to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist assessed this young man and said, here's an SSRI to put him on. An antidepressant. She said, that's it? Is there anything else I can do? What about the side effects? And he said, well, it's either that or look at the food you're feeding him. And she said, what are you feeding him? She said, well, pizza and tacos and soda and hot dogs and like basically whatever I can get into this big eater. And he said, well, have you considered the toxins in the food, the pesticides, the food dyes, the chemicals, GMOs, all that? She said, no. He said, well, you can either feed him organic or you can give him this drug. So she found a way, organic rice and beans, could be 65 cents a serving, right? Or $1.65 at most with salsa and stuff. She fed him 100% organic food, and within 2 weeks the school called her and said, we don't know what you're doing, but this is a completely new human being. And she called me, practically in tears, because she said, he is now 17, and I know that my son would have been one of those kids that went to Walmart and got a gun, and would have been one of these school shooters shooting up the school. But he's not now. He's healthy, he's responsible, he's growing school gardens and community gardens, and he is a healthy, responsible kid. And I said, you know what? You gave your son a new future by finding out about the food and giving him organic food. And not only him, but everybody in that school has a new future because they were not, killed or living through trauma. And not only that, but I would say that our country has a new future because that child is living out his fullest potential. Think about the inventors of Facebook or Google or something that you enjoy. That person had to be able to live to their fullest potential and not be hampered by toxins in the food supply. So that's what we are here today. Next slide is to create a new future for our children, for all of Americans in our country. And we can do this. Instead of using conventional agriculture, we can use regenerative organic agriculture. I should say organic on top of that. But regenerative organic agriculture, please be aware Monsanto is using the buzzwords regenerative agriculture and they're still using pesticides. So we're talking about regenerative organic agriculture. The schools such as Michelle showed in France are doing this already. Many countries around the world are doing this. It's featured in the movie Common Ground, and we really do urge you to watch that movie. The farmer in the star, Gabe Brown, was asked after that movie, what is the first thing we should do? And he, knowing the Moms Across America work, said, get non-toxic, nutrient-dense food in the schools. This is a national homeland security issue, folks. I believe it's only a quarter of the kids that apply to get into the military can get into the military because of mental health and obesity issues. We will not continue to be a superpower, if that's the way you're looking at the United States, if we continue with toxins in the food supply in this way. So I just want to thank you very much for listening, for your time, and ask you to please be our partners in creating a new future for America. It absolutely can be done. We do not need these toxic chemicals in the food supply. They've only been used for the past 40-something years. As Mark will say, and other farmers have said to me repeatedly, we have farmed for thousands of years without these toxic chemicals and GMOs, and we can't do it, and we need to do it, and we must do it now for the future of our country. Thank you so much.
I just want to talk from the perspective of a laboratory scientist who actually measures things in the laboratory, measures the nutrients and the toxins that can be in food, and do that every day. So we have some perspective on the thing. And the reason we do this work, and this really fits with what moms and GMO facts and all of the organizations that the people on this panel represent, that's what they're here to do, is to create a better food supply. And our strategy is to make the invisible visible. That's what the laboratory does. And if you go to the store and you get one of those frozen pieces, and you take it home and you read the ingredient label on the back of it, it won't mention that it has high levels of glyphosate. But it does. It isn't required to be on the ingredient panel, although there's more of it there than there is many of the vitamins that are mentioned on the back of that facts panel. So what we do is we create transparency. And when the food is transparent, when you know what's there, you can make better decisions about what to buy for yourself, and also what to buy for your children when it comes around time to where you have children. And that will come, I'm sure. So when moms and dads and people in general begin to make better choices about the food they eat, this is going to have a major impact on their on the market, on the demand for foods. And it's even going to change the things that farmers, like Mark here, he's already made the changes, but it's going to make changes that farmers, or put farmers in a position to make changes in what they are doing. So that's really what we're all about. And we use very powerful technology to do this. Triple quadrupole mass spectrometry is sort of the gold standard for analysis of contaminants and also of nutrients in foods. And so we've used this for the pesticides, the veterinary drugs, the hormones, antibiotics, phthalates we can do. But basically, the methods that we've used are gold standard methods. They're the best technology out there. And we're also highly accredited. We are examined, for instance, by the FDA. They have a program that we are accredited to called CLIA, which allows us to do clinical laboratory work, to measure things that are important for diagnostics of the health of individuals. We also have an ISO accreditation, which is recognized around the world. And this is a broad accreditation for analytical laboratories. And if a lab doesn't have that, and if the methods they're using don't meet that standard, you sort of wonder what's going on. So that's important. Next slide, please. so if you look at the other, there are a few of the methods that were used that are not actually accredited, but each of those is being is done by internationally recognized methodologies. So everything is really covered in this in a very powerful way. Next slide, please. So what we saw, this is just some of the highlights. Many of the samples had 6, 7, 8, even 9. There were 3 samples out of 41 that we measured that had 9 different pesticides in those individual samples. So you had a pizza or you had a hamburger, and in that hamburger alone, you got more pesticides, 9 of them, than you got vitamins. So yeah, very concerning. And also the heavy metals, both lead and cadmium were present in these foods in every one of the samples. And it turns out that lead and cadmium are both, particularly lead, even those very low amounts have impact on the IQ of young children. So they cause developmental problems in the nervous system that limit the ability of that child to succeed in their whole life, because one's intelligence is the core to a successful life, successful world, how much you make, etc., in terms of income, etc. And this brings us to the fact that there's this claim that the typical claim about pesticides is that, oh, there's just a trace of them there. And it's dose that makes the poison, and therefore we don't have to worry about it because there's only a little there. That isn't true. That even low doses, the lowest doses that have been measured of things like lead, and some of the pesticides are known to have impacts. Not small impacts, but life-changing impacts for the children. So it's something that we have to really avoid. Next slide, please. And this, I know you're all involved with government, and we have great respect, and we wouldn't be here if we didn't have great hopes for what our government can do for the quality of life in America. But there are problems with the way things happen here. And this is just a good example of it. If you look all the way to the right-hand side, that first red line is the threshold. I'm just using here glyphosate, a pesticide, as an example of what's there. It's in the category of pesticides, but that includes herbicides, insecticides, a wide range of things like that, fungicides, etc., all of which can be toxic, carcinogenic, etc. Well, the USDA and the EPA in the US have set a level of safety of glyphosate as being 140,000 micrograms. That's 140 milligrams of glyphosate is considered safe for an individual that has roughly 150 body weight, 150 pound body weight. So you can eat roughly a milligram of glyphosate for every pound of your body, and the EPA and the FDA say it's safe. Now, the European Food Safety Agency says, well, no, actually 32,000 or 0.32 milligrams of glyphosate is safe. But then you ask the Californians, and they are maybe a little bit more stringent, and they say, well, you have to get it down to 1,100 micrograms, or 1.1 milligrams of glyphosate a day in order to be at the safe level. But I looked at their analysis carefully, and what they consider safe is a level that is going to cause only 1 case of cancer for every 100,000 people. Now, if you extrapolate that to the population of the U.S. of California, that means they're saying that it's okay for 300 Californians to get cancer every year from eating food with glyphosate in it. And you could multiply that by 10 for the U.S. You could say 3,000 Americans can die a year from glyphosate, and it's okay. So I don't consider that safe. But when we looked at the other factors involved, we concluded that really you couldn't even begin to talk about safety until you get down to 11 micrograms per gram of body weight to be safe. And that's what we have here in this slide, is that you can see just above the bottom of the graph a line, a dotted or a dashed red line. And notice that organic products deliver still, because there's so much glyphosate, so much pesticide in our environment, there's going to be some in the environment, and therefore even in organic foods. But it's down there at that very low level, where if you eat it, you're on average going to be pretty safe. Life or organic is pretty much a haven from pesticides. And I say pretty much because every once in a while you get one that is not really organic, but it's labeled that way. Because the regulations and your bosses are going to be voting on improvements in those regulations in the near future. And I hope that you can get them to demand stricter standards for these things. So there's no safe level for these things, really. And what we found is that even with glyphosate, that 11 probably should be down even further, because as we learn more about the damaging effects of these things, the more we have to change these. So I'm going to move through these next slides very quickly, but in each of these cases with heavy metals, in next slide, endocrine disruptors, and the next slide, various pesticides and environmental toxins, that these things cause cancer and birth defects, kidney and liver disease, depression, insomnia, if you're having trouble sleeping, check out your diet. It could be making a big difference for how you feel when you get up in the morning, and how easily it is for you to fall asleep at night. So cognitive impacts can be there. ADHD, autism, they're all impacted by this. As we've heard early from the earlier speakers, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, all of these things can be caused by these. So we have to be careful. Levels of pesticides and heavy metals seen in this research clearly signal a threat to health. So the levels that we saw in these foods that millions of Americans eat every day, and that children are being innocently, they are being fed these as good food in their schools. These things are a threat to, they're really, to make it, here in the capital, they're a threat to the American way of life. What we have all really appreciated for so long. Next slide, please. The human body, and I want to end this on sort of a positive light. And the point I want to make is that this does not require huge, revelatory changes in our system. All it requires is to let Mother Nature do her own thing. The human body has a remarkable ability to heal itself and to purify itself. And even if you have been being impacted with harmful things over this period, over a few years of life, that can be changed simply by giving your body a break from all those things so that it can heal, it can remove these things. And I'll tell you about my own experience with this. And this was an experience I did because we've been working on glyphosate a lot. And so I said, okay, I'm going to see what happens to the levels of glyphosate in my body. And so for 5 days, I ate Quaker oats. Quaker oats, by the way, you think you're having a healthy breakfast when you eat them? They are the thing that has the highest level of glyphosate on the planet. So eat organic oats, if nothing else. Okay. Anyway, I wanted to have high levels. So for 5 days, I ate Quaker oats twice a day. And it was painful, both because it was boring and because I knew what it would do to me. And then I switched to an organic diet. And then every day I would take a sample of my urine and test it for glyphosate. And so what did we see? Let's look here. This is the chart. You'll see that it started out on day 5. It started out, I had a level of 2 micrograms per ml of urine. Huge level of glyphosate. We only see levels that high in livestock that are eating genetically engineered grains and things like that that have huge amounts of glyphosate in them. So I switched to an organic diet, and literally in 1 day, 85% of the level of glyphosate went down. You can see that. And then over the next 2 days, it drops to baseline. And it stays down there in a very nice way. And I said, well, let's just continue this and see how it goes. So on day 11, I went out with friends and had pizza. Now, it was an organic restaurant, but evidently there was some glyphosate in that pizza because the next day, boom, up my glyphosate levels went. Not as high as before, but quite noticeably higher. And then over the next 3 days, it dropped off again. So what this tells us is that if you're concerned about glyphosate, glyphosate is a carcinogen, it's an endocrine disruptor, it can contribute to many diseases in this way. If you're concerned about that, all you have to do, eat an organic diet, and it'll go away. And we can extrapolate this to the ecosystem as well. If we stop using glyphosate on our farms, it's going to go away in the environment too. And the same with every other pesticide or toxin that we're currently adding on our food. It is strange logic that human beings have used. And it's a logic that was driven by profit. And that logic was, oh yes, we're going to put pesticides on our foods. We're going to put toxins on our foods because that will kill the bugs. And then they use the poison is, how do you say it? That poison is linked to the dose, okay? And they say, well, the dose is low, so it won't hurt the people. This is not a good logic. We've been using it for 50 years. We need to change. Thank you.
And next is Mark Dudla from Dudla Farms from Wisconsin.
Thank you. I'd really like to thank Zen personally for this opportunity, and it's an honor sitting up here with these amazing people that have put it all on the line for our kids and our future. I hope that on your way out, you'll take a couple bags of organic sunflowers from our regenerative farm in southern Wisconsin. Please do enjoy, share. This is really about the boy in the bucket. That's my father. He was my rock. He's my mentor. We shared a love of farming and a great passion. I wish I could go talk to him again today. Why do we farm organically? Dad was diagnosed in 2008 with mantle cell lymphoma. That's a cancer of the Midwest. At that time, we decided that we would transition 40 acres into his own. Since then, we have transitioned 1,425 acres to certified organic. We were proud conventional farmers that didn't understand the impact of what we were told to do, feed the world. Didn't understand at what cost that was. So we had a complete paradigm shift. I had no more base. Everything I believed in was a lie. It was corruption for an industry. And so now, as a farmer, I believe it's nutrient-dense, safe food. Certainly, the safety comes from the organic and the USDA standards of organic, right? And then nutrient-dense food comes from biology and healthy soils. And just like kids, the soil is much the same. If we stop the toxic overload, we will fix the kids. If we stop the toxic overload on our soils with pesticides, the soil will heal itself. We can do this. The lymphoma doctors listed the possible causes of my dad's cancer. Exposure to herbicides, glyphosate, atrazine. Exposure to insecticides, Dad used diazinon when we raised gladiolas. Exposure to degreasers. What's a degreaser? Well, it's actually a surfactant in all the pesticides we use. And we don't even test the safety of that surfactant added to the active ingredient of that herbicide. We don't even do that. We're guinea pigs. So the formulation, that's really important of what we're using in the testing. Dad passed away in 2011. He was 73 years young. We know these things cause cancer. So what's it like treating your father with this cancer? You got that boy in the bucket, that youth, right? The daily flushing of his PICC line came directly to his heart to inject chemotherapy into his body. Dressing his wounds with honey and patches, knowing that he will never recover. So think of the American farmer today in the hamster wheel. That same company that sells you glyphosate also takes your net worth that you've worked for your entire life and sells you chemotherapy. How does the farmer get out of this? FDA has increased over and over the allowable limits in our food. What was the allowable limit for my dad? What was it? What was the safe limit? What's the safe limit for your kids? Your grandkids? What is it? Not only is organic food much safer, but it's certainly more nutritious. Organic grass-fed dairy and meats contain 50% more omega-3s. We know how important that is, the 3-to-6 ratio. Organic crops have more anthocyanins and flavonols, eat of the rainbow, right? The colors of the rainbow, right? We know these things. Organic systems, we rely on compost and far less nitrogen. We have a problem in the Mississippi River Valley, right? We have a Gulf hypoxia. Do you know that shrimpers have to go 90 miles to get to their shrimp beds because of all the synthetic nitrogen and pesticides and fertilizers that are flushed down the Mississippi River? Think of being a shrimper and the impact we have. Organic crops grow more slowly, and we know that these plants produce more metabolites, which are healthy for us. Organic tomatoes have twice the concentration of a flavonoid known as quercetin. we can make a change. Organic, substantially higher concentrations of antioxidants. Can we do this? How are we going to do it? In 2022, Wisconsin K through 12, there was nearly 850,000 students in 2,000 schools and 423 school districts. They fed in Wisconsin 48 million meals. That's daunting. And we're just one little farm in southern Wisconsin. Can we do this? Well, at Duval Farms Organics, we have 10 classes of dry beans, 600,000 pounds of dry beans. And if a serving is 0.125 pounds, that's 4.8 million servings of beans our farm can serve your kids. Wheat, rye, buckwheat, cornmeal, we have 800,000 pounds, or 22 million servings. White and yellow popcorn, and take your sunflower seed. We have 34 million servings that our farm can produce. We have a 3-acre CSA that we give for share on the back 40. That's supporting 104 families with vegetables on just the back 40 of our farm. But, you know, it's not just one farm. We have a community, we have a network of organic growers. There are 1,454 other organic growers that want to step up and supply this need. Nationally, there are 17,000 on the national database, the USDA organic database, over 5 million acres that can do this. We can do this. We can make this happen. Organic versus conventional. Yeah, the yields versus conventional are a little bit lower, 75%. Organic prices are a little bit higher, nearly 200%. Bottom line is the expenses are about 110%. But the organic net returns for the farmer is over 350% greater than conventional ag. There is the right incentive, and young people are jumping into this. One of the big drivers is organic labor per acre. We're about 180% more labor, right? Because we have to cross our fields so many times. We don't have the use of a sprayer to go back and kill all the weeds with glyphosate. We have to do it other methods. The navy beans in this picture, I'm out there with the swather 2 weeks ago producing navy beans. And if you could, go to the Senate. The U.S. Senate has U.S. Senate bean soup every single day. It's a regulation. And these are navy beans. So by swathing, we don't use a sprayer to desiccate. Okay, we swath it, we get the green weeds to dry back, we combine them, and we're trading chemistry for labor to protect human health, the health of our kids. We have the solutions. We don't need research. We can do this now. We came from 2,000 years of being organic. Low-hanging fruit is certainly removing the desiccant from agriculture. Reasons to consider organic farming. There's less health risks to the farmer and the family from dangerous farm chemicals. Less risk of mental health and farmer suicide. More opportunities for small family farms with more enterprises, diversification, and value-added products. Trend is increasing. Young people young farmers are flocking to organic. It is the future. They see it. Healthier soils, more earthworms, more organic matter. By the way, 0% organic matter, 0% human health. We're trending there. We got to stop killing the life in the soil and the same in our children. Organic is not the Dust Bowl of the 30s. We have no-till organic regenerative systems. You know, when we talk about regenerative ag, don't be fooled. It's not just about using more cover crops and more glyphosate, okay? How can you truly be regenerative and sustainable if you're contaminating the surface waters and our drinking water with pesticide? There's no undo button to clean that up. So this is actually Crimp Zero rye, or we're no-tilling soybeans in on our farm, armored and weatherproof the soil. We have the technology. The next slide, please, shows that looks like a GMO field. That's actually an organic field of soybeans using that system of Crimp Zero rye. It is possible to regenerate the soil and still have clean fields. The technology that we have for the war on weeds. Here's a burner, 2 LP tanks, right? Burn off those weeds before your crop comes up. We have an electric weed zapper that we can zap what we miss through, next slide please, what we miss after cultivation or what comes through the rye cover crop mat. And today, this isn't your great-grandfather's organics. We have AI machines identifying the weeds and controlling the lasers, and soon they're autonomous. I won't even be in the seat. I can't afford one of these yet. They're about $1 million. We use biodynamic farming practices. Here's purple body vetch and rye that were incorporated biodynamically before corn. By the way, if we're talking about climate, are you aware that the United States, 48 states, uses 1% of the entire world's energy in the form of synthetic nitrogen applied to the 48 states? Yeah, and those poor shrimpers, right? We use RTK cultivation. We collect 26 satellites, and we can farm sub-inch. I can actually text you and drive my tractor at the same time. It's amazing. We have camera-controlled cultivators that know exactly where the row is. This is a huge deal. This isn't your great-grandpa's organics. This is 21st century, taking the best technology of what we have and applying it towards agriculture. Imagine if we took the budget of some of the chemical companies and applied it to organics, what we could do. We also are solving the issues. Here's prairie borders and buffers to meet the organic standards. When my neighbor sprays glyphosate, I can't have that drift on my field. So I plant 40 feet of native fir on the edge. Now imagine if you had a bunch of organic farmers doing that, and we could connect all the habitats in a state, in a region. We could solve the pollinator crisis, okay? It's that simple. It's the old, movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Well, it's that simple. If you plant it, they come. Let's use Wisconsin as a state model. Legislate off of what is working with the USDA pilot grant programs, farm-to-school programs in Wisconsin and other states. And thank you yesterday for giving the USDA giving $60 million to systems to help feed our kids. That's a great step. But we need your help because we got to remove the toxic chemicals from our food. Okay? We need part 2, or we don't have a future. Invest in our school luncheons, right? Or invest in sick care. Aren't we going to spend the money either way? Why not invest in our future? Organic. Give our kids a chance. The goal being, as John said, zero toxicity. Nutrient-dense, safe food allows every kid to be a potential honor student. Don't we want honor students as our future? Not sick care? What organic farms need? Long-term commitments. I have 7-8-year rotations. We have to match local buyers with seasonal menus that match the production cycle of farms. We can do this. We need efficient transportation logistical systems. We need financing partners. We work with some great people, Flanagan State Bank, Iroquois Valley, and Mad Ag, and they're underwritten by the USDA low-interest loans that makes all this work. We need grants for facilities and storage and logistics. You know, a lot of schools don't have the time to actually peel and slice the carrots, so we need minimally processed facilities there. Many crops, you know, are made once per year. We got to store that. You know, school lunch programs feed kids more than 180 days out of the year. Just-in-time logistics. We need consistency in USDA subsidizing of organic farms for student health. We know the hockey stick of the problems. John showed us the reverse, the hockey stick down, if we just stop feeding them toxic food. It's simple. At Doodle Farms, we believe in farming bioregeneratively, healthy. We keep our soils healthy, and it does the same for us, and it will for generations to come. So enjoy Doodle Farms organics like our world depends on it, because it kind of does. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I learn every time I hear from these panel members. Before getting back into food, I would be remiss not to discuss the fact that certainly from Mark's father's death of lymphoma, our children are also exposed to Roundup regularly on the playground and in parks. And you guys look like a smart group, so I'm imagining you might know there's some flaws over at the EPA. This is a known human carcinogen. And no matter what the EPA says and no matter what industry says, there's enough evidence and the lawsuits have shown that this can cause cancer. And one little detail in those trials that came out that I think is extremely interesting is glyphosate is claimed not to penetrate in through the skin. So if it went through the skin, it could get into the capillaries and then cause cancer. So up through 2020, some internal studies that Monsanto did, actually through 2010, showed 4 to 10% dermal absorption rates that would go into the body. Starting in 2010, those numbers suddenly went to 0. And so that was strange because suddenly glyphosate isn't absorbed into the body. That seems odd. And so they looked into it and found that the way they got away with it was by taking the human cadaver skin and baking it and then freezing it and making it so leather-like that when they ran those studies to see about the absorption rate was 0. So if the EPA asks what's the absorption rate of glyphosate, it's based on that study, which is just very, very, very sad. We talked a lot about banning glyphosate in the pre-harvest spray. It's estimated that 80% of our dietary exposure to glyphosate is straight up from this process of pre-harvest desiccation. As farmer Mark Dudlett told us, it is not necessary to do this. There are practices farmers have been swapping for generations. And so we could ban it tomorrow and the implications would not be great to the farmer. However, human health you'd see start to recover. There's a petition that is 154,000 and flying that we launched last year with Senator Booker and Dr. Zach Bush. Very excited. You can see the American public wants this. There is a bill that is sort of perpetually out there to halt pre-harvest desiccation. It would be great to see that make some headway because you can see it immediately in healthcare costs coming down. Action items for everyone. So, as I said, stop spraying glyphosate as a pre-harvest desiccant. Second, don't allow then for other pesticides to come in, because then we get into a pesticide merry-go-round where, okay, so now we aren't using this one. Glyphosate's banned for use in pre-harvest spraying. Well, now here are 5 others that we could potentially use for it that actually might be more toxic than glyphosate. So it's really important that there should be no chemical desiccation with toxic pesticides. Support regenerative organic agriculture with the vigor of the Farm Bill. This is our moment, and I'm sure any of you attending right now have been probably pretty active in the Farm Bill discussion. This would be enormous. Let's start subsidizing the organic regenerative farmers and allow them to have a profitable life and to be able to provide us healthy food. It's such a huge one. I know it's an uphill battle for everyone on that front. Insist that the FDA tests our food for food toxicity levels. We wouldn't have the results of these school lunches and fast food if it wasn't for moms across America and funders deciding to sponsor them to test it. The FDA doesn't test any of this. It's shocking to me. They don't know what our children are eating or what we're eating. And can you imagine, I don't know about you guys, but I was really upset to see these studies. I mean, no wonder why I've had all kinds of chronic issues. My whole family is sensitive to food. It's just not fair. We can see why. Another thing that you might not know is that the EPA actually never tests full formulas of pesticides. So they test glyphosate, which they consider the active ingredient, but not the really powerful, more toxic surfactant that goes with it. And they say that's okay because it's not identified as the main active ingredient, but we know it to be more toxic as a formula. Let's place maximum levels of acceptable daily intake of pesticides on school lunches at 10 parts per billion. That's a level that Dr. Fagan thinks is attainable and would really make a big dent in this problem. And then finally, let's support the build out of infrastructure to support clean school lunches. We can't get to this goal without also having the kitchens and the transportation put into place. Thank you. I would love for Dr. Farrow to wrap up for us.
Before you do that, I just want to make sure we thank Monster Cross America supporters Children's Health Defense and the Center Academy for the ability to do this testing and for us to be here today.
Okay, here we go for the wrap up. You don't have to take out your Venmo, folks. We're not asking for money. What we're asking for is something a bit different. Here is the ask and the call to action. I think you can all agree that we've done our work. Would you agree with that? Is that a fair statement? That you can see this panel has done their work. So now what we're asking, no, not that you do your homework, but that we collaboratively join together and work together to make this happen. So we're asking for the we, not cash. We're asking for the work as a collaborative team to make this change today. So that's the ask and the call to action. As your pediatrician, and looking at some of you in the audience today, I think I could be your pediatrician. What we're saying is the first thing I do when I take care of families, and if they don't do this, I tell them they're not ready, is to change their diet. We have to reduce and remove the toxic load. What's making kids sick is the toxic load. It's called allostatic load. It's too much and your little bodies can't handle it. And I would go on to say that our own bodies, our adult bodies, can't handle it either. So the call to action is that we make this change immediately. We are solutionaries. You are solutionaries. Thank you for attending. And we're asking for the big change starting now on behalf of all our most vulnerable, our children, and the planetary environmental health, not to mention offsetting climate change with carbon sequestration and regenerative organic fields. So we thank you for attending. I think I'll pass the mic over to you, John, for the last thing.
How the USDA incentivizes the organic farmer is going to decide our future of this country. Why am I here? It's the middle of harvest. I should be in a combine. It took the time to come here because we can't wait another 5 or 10 years to get this down the road. We have to act now. We will be bankrupt with healthcare crisis if we don't get a handle on this. And it's our future. It's our kids. It's important. We don't have that luxury. You've seen the hockey stick of our kids' health. It's now. We have to do this now. We have to act now. We have to have the right incentives. Unshackle our kids from the chemical toxicity of food lunch programs, unshackle our organic farmers to help. I need your help. We can do this. We need you to act with the pen and the right legislation to provide the right incentives to ensure that we have a future as a country.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Please, once again, take some food, and we have a lot of different printouts of information. We're all very reachable, so if you have any questions, we're very happy to answer. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna.
Grab